It was meant to be just another late night interview, casual, warm, forgettable. But when Keanu Reeves sat down beneath the studio lights, something shifted. His hands trembled slightly as the name of the new Pope Robert Prevost slipped into the conversation. What followed wasn't a story, it was a confession wrapped in silence, memory, and something else no one could name. And when he finally spoke, the room stopped breathing. Oh, and before we continue, tell us, what's the one thing you love most about Keanu Reeves? Let us know in the comments. The studio lights came on slowly, almost hesitantly, as if even the electricity was unsure about what was about to happen. The audience cheered and clapped, but there was something strange in the air. Maybe it was the muffled sound of footsteps or the way the polished floor echoed unnaturally. Maybe it was the guest. Keanu Reeves walked onto the stage with his usual quiet presence. He smiled, but it wasn't a smile that reached his eyes. His hands were folded calmly in front of him, his shoulders slightly slumped. He didn't look nervous, he looked distant. The host, all charisma and charm, stood up to greet him with a casual hug and a joke that danced lightly across the room. Keanu, you still look like a samurai monk or a brooding guitarist from the nines. The audience laughed. Keanu smiled faintly and nodded. He took his seat, adjusted his jacket, and looked down at the table. Between them, there was a glass of water, a notepad, and a crucifix, but not just any crucifix. It was broken. The wooden base was cracked. The figure of Christ leaned awkwardly to one side as if it had slipped in pain. The host didn't seem to notice the weight of it. He took a sip from a mug with his name on it and kept the energy moving. So much going on in the world, man. Did you see that the new Pope's already making headlines? Robert Prevost, right? He's kind of, I don't know, Jediac. I'm serious, calm, quiet, kind of floating. The crowd chuckled, but Keanu didn't. He looked at the crucifix again, then slowly raised his eyes. The camera zoomed in. There was something there, a shadow across his face, something unspoken. There's something about him. Keanu began, his voice soft but firm. I've never been able to explain. The host blinked, caught off guard by the tone. He leaned in slightly, trying to lighten it. You mean spiritually, or does he remind you of someone? No, Keanu replied. It's what he doesn't remind me of. The room shifted. A strange quiet settled over the space. The audience grew still. The host adjusted himself in his seat, trying again to guide the show back towards safer ground. Well, maybe he's just trying to be different, a new kind of Pope, right? Every one of them brings a new vibe. Keanu closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, there was a shimmer in them. Not tears, but the pressure before them. He glanced back at the crucifix, then slowly, with a kind of reverence, he reached out and touched it. His fingers rested lightly on the cracked wood, tracing the fracture like it was familiar. He held it for a moment, then let it go, letting it sit broken where it was. And then he looked at the host directly. Clearly, I've stayed quiet for long enough. The words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. The crowd went completely silent. The host didn't move. No one knew what he was about to say, but they all understood something. This wasn't going to be a joke. The camera didn't cut away. The silence lingered for another breath, maybe two, before the host finally spoke, his tone lowered, unsure. You've stayed quiet about what? Keanu. Keanu looked down at the table again, but not at the crucifix this time. His hand moved slowly toward his jacket pocket. He reached in and pulled out a faded, creased envelope. It was yellowed by time, the edges soft, like it had been handled more than it should have. He placed it gently on the table between them. This arrived a few years ago, he said. I didn't open it because I was told not to. The host leaned forward, slightly instinctively sensing something. Wait, he told. By who? Keanu didn't answer right away. He just looked at the envelope the way someone might look at an old photo part, memory part. Wound. It came after a meeting in Rome. It was handed to me in silence. No explanation, no context, just this. He slid the envelope slightly closer to the host, who looked at it with hesitation. There was no name on the front, only a faint symbol across inside. A circle. I thought it was a mistake, Keanu said, or maybe a warning, but there was a note inside the envelope, one line. He looked directly at the audience. No one moved. Do not read until the dove has landed. The host raised his eyebrows. The dove. Keanu nodded. It didn't make sense. To me, not then, but I kept it for years. I almost forgot about it. He looked down again, and then Pope Francis the envelope. And letter sat in full view of the camera. The studio lights shimmered faintly off the cracked crucifix, and for the first time in the entire show, even the production crew seemed unsure of what to do. No one reached for the next card. No one whispered instructions in the host's earpiece. Keanu sat quietly as if he'd said all he could, but then he spoke again, softer, now more distant. There's something else. The host turned toward him carefully, no longer performing for the crowd now. It was just two men sitting at a table, one of them holding something heavy. Inside, after Prevost's election, Keanu said, I started having a dream the same. One night after night. He didn't embellish the words. He didn't try to dramatize. If anything, his delivery made it worse, too plain to be fiction. I'm standing in Street Peters Square. It's empty. The sky is pale like dawn, but lifeless. I look up at the balcony. The host leaned and slightly, and he's there. Keanu nodded slowly. The new Pope post dressed in white, smiling. He paused, but he doesn't cast a shadow. The air seemed to shift. Even the audience, quiet as they were, stirred slightly. That involuntary human reaction to something unnatural. The sun is behind him, Keanu continued, but the light passes straight through. There's no outline, no darkness behind him, just more light. The host tried to reframe it. Well, dreams can be strange, symbolic. Maybe your mind's just processing something. Keanu looked at him, not judging, just knowing it doesn't feel like a dream. It feels like a memory that hasn't happened yet. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice taking on a different weight. And it's always the same every time he raises one hand. The bells in the square should ring, but they don't. There's no sound, not from birds, not from the people, because there are no people, just him and me and the silence. The host's voice dropped. That's haunting. Keanu didn't smile. He didn't blink. I've had dreams about death before, about grief, but I've never woken up crying, not until this one. The audience let out a soft collective breath, the kind that comes when you realize you've been holding it too long. I didn't want to talk about it, Keanu admitted, not even to friends, because the more I thought about it, the more I wondered if I was seeing something. No one else could. The host tried to help him out, but it's just a dream, right? Keanu turned his head slowly, his eyes searching. Then why does it feel like a warning? The question sat unanswered. Then Keanu added, dreams are symbol shadows of the unconscious, right? But what does it mean when the dream has no shadow? The host had nothing left to say. No joke, no segue. Keanu leaned back, again folding his hands, and somewhere behind them, one of the studio lights flickered just once, but it was enough. There was a beat of silence before the host finally found his voice again. Keanu, are you saying you've received more than just that one letter? Keanu looked down, nodded once, then reaching inside his jacket again, he pulled out a small bundle of envelopes. They were aged, some with edges torn, others smudged with what looked like ash or dust. None of them had return addresses. None bore stamps. All had been delivered by hand, placed anonymously where he would find them, or where someone wanted him to. He placed them gently on the table, spreading them like a deck of cards. The host leaned in, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. Where did these come from? Keanu looked up. Different places, hotel rooms, my trailer on set. Once inside a book I hadn't touched in years. He picked up the top letter and opened it. Inside was a small piece of thick textured paper, typed, no signature, just one line. When the successor smiles, faith watches. In silence, Keanu placed that one aside and pulled out another. The man from Lemur, the chosen one, without voice. Another and another. Do not speak the name. Let him reveal himself. If he does not blink, the world must. He wears no shadow because the light fears him. The host shook his head slowly. Are you saying someone has been sending you these since Post became Pope? Keanu nodded. The first one came 2 days after the announcement. He held up a thinner envelope, airmail style, pale blue, folded inward. The host stared at it like it might burn him if he touched it. None of them use his name, Keanu said. Never. Robert Prevost, just symbols, descriptions, fragments. The host swallowed hard. And you think it's deliberate? Keanu raised his eyebrows slightly. You ever tried to write something honest but couldn't use the name of the person you were writing About he let the question hang its knot. Censorship, its fear the audience sat, frozen absorbing each word like scripture. Even the lights above seemed dimmer now, as if the room itself were leaning into the conversation. The host picked up one of the letters carefully, respectfully, and read the line again. Aloud, if he does not blink the world. Must he looked at Keanu, what does that even mean? Keanu's eyes darkened just slightly. I think it means we're being watched, all of us, but not in the way we're used to. He tapped one of the envelopes. These aren't threats, they're signals, quiet one's, like someone trying to tell me. Don't aim it, don't challenge it, just observe, let him show himself. The host sat back processing. Do you think someone's trying to stop you from saying something? For the first time in the interview, Keanu broke eye contact. He looked down, not at the crucifix, not at the letters, but into some space beyond the table, into something neither seen nor the set. Felt colder now. The cameras rolled, but there was no more performance in the room. Even the host, normally composed and practiced in the rhythms of live conversation, sat silently, his eyes fixed on a bundle of anonymous letters, as if they might move on their own. Keanu, still calm, picked up the envelope from earlier, the one bearing the seal he had finally broken after the death of Francis. There's a second page, he said. In the letter Francis sent me. He unfolded it with care, like it might fall apart in his hands. The audience watched as he flattened it against the table. He didn't hand it over, he read it himself. His voice, when it came, was almost reverent. He may dress in light, but carry the hollow. His gaze will be full, but never present. His words will echo comfort, but will not reach the soul. Keanu looked up. For a moment, Francis didn't write like this. Not normally. This wasn't doctrine. This wasn't papal. This was something else. He looked back down and kept reading. There will be suffering beneath his silence. If he does not see it, he is not the shepherd. He is only the image of one. The host blinked slowly, lips parting slightly, as if he was about to speak, then thought better of it. Keanu let the paper rest against the table, the corners lifted slightly from years of storage, but the ink was still strong. He was warning me, Keanu said, warning us that a time would come when the role would be filled, but the spirit would be absent. He paused, that someone could wear the robe, stand on the balcony, smile, speak peace, but not carry the weight. The host shook his head slowly, voice quiet. But this is massive. I mean, it's Francis. He wasn't a man prone to paranoia. Keanu nodded. No, he wasn't, which is what makes this so hard to ignore. He picked up the page again, and this time read the last few lines aloud. If I die before him, he must be watched, not for what he does, but for what he does not do. That sentence hung in the air like the smell of smoke. The host looked at Keanu, searching, watched for what Keanu didn't hesitate for what he doesn't say. That was when the room truly went still. Not a breath, not a shuffle. Even the hum of the stage lights felt dimmer, like the electricity itself had drawn back. Keanu folded the letter carefully, returned it to the envelope, and slid it aside. I think Francis knew he wouldn't be able to stop it, he said, but he hoped someone would see it, say it, even if it was too late. The host finally spoke again, quietly, as if afraid someone else might be listening. Why send it to you? Keanu looked down. I've asked myself that every day. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a bishop. I'm an actor. He exhaled through his nose, a bitter smile playing on his lips. But maybe that's why. Maybe he thought I'd see it as story, as something real beneath the symbols. He gestured gently toward the crucifix, still broken, still resting like an open wound in the center of the table. Or maybe I was just the only one he thought would listen. The host stared at him. Do you believe it? Keanu looked back. No hesitation. I do. Pause, not because I want to, but because every day since the balcony, I felt it. He tapped his chest just once, right here. Something that isn't missing, but something that's pretending not to be. The host didn't know what to say. There was no script for this part of the show. No cue cards, no can laughter, only silence, the kind that follows truth, or the arrival of something too big to name. The lights above the stage dimmed just a fraction more, perhaps by accident. Perhaps not. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted entirely. It no longer felt like a talk show. It felt like a room inside a confession, one where the walls had ears. Keanu sat still, his expression hadn't changed since the last letter. He was no longer speaking to the host. He was speaking to something else, to the presence that always exists when truth tries to breathe. And then he said there was an interview, one that never aired. The host looked up sharply with, "Francis?" Keanu nodded once. "It was recorded privately, not for broadcast, not even for the Vatican archives. Officially." He leaned forward. Slightly, I was shown a piece of it, of the record, a friend of a friend, someone who worked inside the host's eyes. Widened just slightly. "What did it show?" Keanu took a breath. "It wasn't long. The clip I saw, maybe 40 seconds, but it was enough." He paused. Francis was seated in a small room, no robes, no ring, just a white shirt. He looked tired, old, but clear. His words were slow, measured. He looked at the audience now. He said, "Don't listen to my voice. Watch the silence. One day it will speak louder than I ever could." The host blinked. "Wait, that's cryptic." Keanu nodded. "That's why I didn't understand it at first. It felt like poetry, like someone who knew he was running out of time." He sat back slightly, but then the camera pans just slightly. Francis turns almost reflexively, like he's looking past the interviewer, and there he is. The host didn't move. "Prevost." Keanu nodded, standing at the edge of the frame, not announced, not introduced, just there. The audience was dead quiet. He's standing still, watching, not blinking, just watching. The host's voice lowered. Was he listening? Keanu shook his head. It didn't feel like that. It felt like he wasn't listening at all. He was watching the lens, not the interviewer, not Francis. The lens. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat. It was heavier stock, not the kind used in high quality printing. He unfolded it slowly. They deleted the video, every copy from every device. I know. I asked around. I pulled every string I had. He laid the paper flat on the table. It was a still frame, a photo printed from a paused moment in the video. The host looked at it. The audience couldn't see it yet, but the host did. His jaw tightened. Keanu pointed to the figure on the far right side of the image, blurred slightly, barely in the frame. "That's him. That's Prevost." The host leaned closer, squinting, then recoiled slightly. He's looking right at the camera. Keanu nodded, not at the person behind it, not at Francis, not at the floor, not at the future, at the lens. He tapped the photo gently. "When I saw this, it felt like he wasn't in the room. It felt like he was watching through the screen, like he already knew someone else would be watching later." The host sat back slowly. "This is terrifying." Keanu didn't flinch. "They deleted everything, wiped every source, but not before I saw it." The host looked back down at the image. "Why would they erase it?" Keanu looked him in the eyes. "Because it didn't match the story." Silence. Then he added, "Francis wasn't giving a farewell. He was giving a warning." The still image sat between them, the only visual proof of a moment lost to intentional silence. And behind the photo, behind the story, behind every word Keanu had said tonight, there loomed a larger truth. Not everything sacred is holy, and not everything holy survives. The edit, the studio, didn't feel like a studio anymore. The cameras, the lights, the polished floor, they were still there. But something invisible had shifted. The room had turned into something closer to a chapel, or a courtroom, or maybe just a place where something ancient had been waiting to be